The cantina on Nexus Station buzzed with quiet conversations and the clink of glasses. Smoke from a dozen different worlds drifted through the dim light. In the back corner, away from the crowd, sat a figure that made most patrons look twice. Before quickly turning away, Commander ZXI was not hard to miss. His blue-gray skin bore deep scars that ran from his neck to his hands. 4 golden eyes, each the size of a human fist, moved constantly as they watched the room. His large frame filled the booth, and his 6-fingered hands wrapped around a glass of amber liquid that he had not touched in over an hour. Jake Morrison slid into the seat across from him. The young human reporter looked nervous as he placed a small recording device on the table between them. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the settings. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Commander," Jake said in a quiet voice. "I know this is not easy for you." ZXI's 4 eyes focused on the human. For a long moment he said nothing. The cantina seemed to grow quieter around them, as if other customers sensed something important was about to happen. "Easy, ZXI," repeated slowly. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "Nothing about humans has ever been easy," Jake leaned forward. "The Galactic Council has kept most details about the Terran integration wars classified for 20 years. The public knows humans joined the coalition, but not how or why. Your unit was there from the beginning." The alien veteran's scarred face twitched. One of his hands moved to touch a particularly deep scar that ran across his throat. "My unit," he said bitterly. "The 73rd Valerian Shock Battalion? We were the best warriors in the coalition fleet. Elite soldiers, we had crushed rebellions on 47 worlds. But Earth was different," Jake pressed gently. ZXI finally lifted his glass and took a long drink. The liquid burned down his throat, but he welcomed the pain. It was nothing compared to the memories. "Different," he said, with a harsh laugh that made nearby patrons turn their heads. "Your species does not understand the meaning of that word. When the Coalition first detected your world, the briefings were simple. Primitive species, basic kinetic weapons, chemical rockets. We expected another easy integration." Jake's recording device captured every word as ZXI continued. "The intelligence report said humans were young. Violent, yes, but in the way. That all primitive species are violent. Like children with sticks fighting over toys. The war planners gave us 3 days to secure your major population centers. 3 days for an entire world." The alien commander stared at his reflection in the amber liquid. In it, he could see the young soldier he had been 20 years ago, confident, proud, unbroken. "We approached your moon first. Luna Base, you called it. A small outpost with perhaps 40 of your people, mining equipment. Basic defensive systems. My battalion had 300 of the finest warriors in the galaxy. We carried plasma weapons that could melt through starship hulls. Personal shields that could stop your primitive bullets. We were gods of war, and we were coming to discipline children." Jake scribbled notes even though his device was recording. "What happened when you landed?" ZXI's 4 eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, they held a pain that made the human reporter lean back. "We sent the standard surrender demand. Every species receives the same message. Submit to coalition authority, lay down your weapons. Accept integration into galactic civilization. Resist and face consequences." And the humans responded? A woman answered our transmission. "Lieutenant Lisa Hayes, young, maybe 25. Of your years." She looked directly into our communication device with these strange, small eyes your species has. Just 2 eyes, so tiny, but when she looked at us... ZXI paused and took another drink. "What did she say?" "She said, 'Go to hell.'" The alien warrior's voice grew quiet. "Just those 3 words? Then she cut the transmission." Jake blinked. That was it. That was it. No negotiation. No fear, no begging for mercy, just defiance. ZXI shook his head slowly. We had heard defiance before, of course. Every species tries to resist at first. But there is always fear. Underneath, always the knowledge that they are outmatched. This human female showed nothing but anger. The cantina around them had grown completely silent. Other patrons, many of them veterans from various worlds, listened without pretending otherwise. This was history being told. The assault began at dawn your time, HFY continued. Standard deployment. Atmospheric fighters to suppress defensive positions, drop ships to land troops. We had done this dance on dozens of worlds. It always ended the same way. But not this time, the alien agreed. The humans did something we had never seen before. They did not retreat when our fighters appeared. They did not surrender when our troops landed. They did not break when we demonstrated our superior weapons. HFY's scarred hands clenched into fists on the table. They fought, not like cornered animals fighting for survival, not like desperate creatures making their last stand. They fought. Like ... he struggled for words. Like they had been waiting for us, like they wanted us to come. Jake's pen stopped moving. What do you mean? I mean that Lieutenant Hayes and her 40 soldiers acted as if 300 alien warriors with advanced weapons were exactly what they had been hoping to face that day. They took positions. They coordinated their defense. They smiled. Smiled? Smiled, HFY confirmed. As if this was not a hopeless battle against impossible odds, but the most natural thing in the universe. As if dying for their small outpost was not a tragedy, but an honor. The recording device continued to capture every word as commander. HFY prepared to tell the human reporter about the day his understanding of warfare changed forever. Commander HFY stared at the table for a long moment before continuing his story. Jake Morrison waited, his recording device capturing the silence that filled the cantina. Other patrons had moved closer, pretending to drink while they listened to the alien veteran's tale. The first wave hit Luna Base at 0600 hours, HFY said finally. 50 of my best soldiers. We expected to overwhelm their defenses in minutes. Our plasma rifles could cut through their concrete walls like paper. Our energy shields made their bullets bounce off like rain. The alien warrior lifted his glass again but did not drink. His 4 eyes reflected the amber light as memories played across his scarred features. But the humans did not fight the way we expected. They did not stand in lines and fire at us directly. They hid, they waited. They used their knowledge of the base against us. Jake leaned forward. Guerrilla tactics? More than that, HFY replied. They turned their own home into a weapon. Lieutenant Hayes had prepared for our arrival. Every corridor was a trap. Every room was a killing ground. They had moved supplies, ammunition, and medical equipment to positions we could not predict. The alien commander's voice grew rough as he continued. Sergeant Bob Carter was their explosives expert, a big human male with gray hair and calm eyes. While we were focusing on Hayes and her defensive positions, Carter was crawling through maintenance tunnels we did not know existed. He planted charges in places that made no tactical sense. What do you mean? He blew up their own water recycling system. It flooded the lower levels where our heaviest troops were advancing. He destroyed their power grid, plunging the base into darkness. We had night vision, but the humans knew every inch of their territory in complete blackness. HFY paused as a server approached their table. The young Centaurian female quickly refilled his glass and hurried away without making eye contact. Even other aliens feared the scarred veteran. The flooding forced us to retreat to higher levels, he continued. That was when we met Private Danny Rodriguez. Jake looked up from his notes. The young soldier you mentioned in your outline? Barely 18 years old, small for a human male. He should have been afraid. Any rational being would have surrendered when faced with our superior firepower. HFY's scarred face twisted into something that might have been admiration. Instead, he was angry. The alien warrior described the narrow corridor where they first encountered Rodriguez. The young human had positioned himself at a choke point, with nothing but mining charges and an old-fashioned rifle that belonged to his grandfather. Our scanners showed he had maybe 20 rounds of ammunition. We had energy weapons that could fire continuously for hours. Simple mathematics said he would die quickly and we would advance. But he didn't die quickly. No, he used every shot with perfect accuracy. Our soldiers wore armor that could stop most projectiles, but Rodriguez aimed for joints and weak points. He hit the same spot twice on 3 different warriors, cracking their protection. Zexiah's hands clenched as he remembered the fear that had crept into his troops for the first time. When his ammunition ran out, we expected him to surrender. Instead, he activated the mining charges. The explosion brought down half the corridor ceiling, trapping 6 of my soldiers under rubble. The alien commander took a long drink before continuing. Rodriguez was caught in his own explosion, broken ribs, internal bleeding. 1 arm nearly severed. Any civilized being would have stayed down and waited for medical attention. Jake's pen moved quickly across his notepad, but he didn't stay down. He picked up a knife with his good hand and charged us. 1 human boy, dying from his wounds, attacking a squad of elite alien warriors. Zexiah's 4 eyes closed. He killed 2 of my soldiers before we stopped him. Not because his knife was better than our weapons, but because he fought like death itself. The cantina had grown completely silent. Even the background music had stopped playing. While Rodriguez was dying, he was still trying to help his wounded comrades escape through a maintenance hatch. Even as we fired on him, his last words were instructions to another human on where to find medical supplies. Zexiah opened his eyes and looked directly at Jake. That was when I realized we were not fighting soldiers. We were fighting something else entirely. Something that did not follow the rules of warfare that every other species in the galaxy understood. The reporter stopped writing. What rules? Self-preservation. Survival instinct. The basic understanding that living is better than dying. The alien veteran's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Humans have these instincts, but they have something stronger. They have reasons to die that matter more to them than reasons to live. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The siege continued for 2 more days, Zexiah said. Every human we encountered fought the same way. Lieutenant Hayes coordinated her defense even while bleeding from plasma burns. She had been hit 4 times but refused medical attention until her soldiers were treated first. The alien warrior described how the human commander had turned the base's communication system into a weapon, broadcasting false information to confuse the attacking forces while coordinating real orders through hand signals her troops had memorized. On the final day, we breached their command center. Hayes was alone, wounded, with an empty weapon. We expected her to surrender. And she didn't. She activated the base's self-destruct sequence. She looked at us with those small human eyes and said, "You can have the base, but you cannot have the victory." Zexiah finished his drink and set the glass down with shaking hands. We stopped the self-destruct, but the damage was done. My unit was shattered, not from casualties, though we had many. We were broken because we had learned that humans would rather die than lose, and that terrified us more than any weapon. Jake Morrison refilled his water glass with trembling hands. The story Commander Zexiah was telling shook him more than he had expected. Around them, the cantina remained silent as other patrons waited for the alien veteran to continue. Zexiah stared at his empty glass for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. After Luna Base, the Coalition Command realized they had underestimated your species. The reports from my unit troubled the war planners. They decided to use psychological warfare instead of direct assault. The alien warrior gestured to the server for another drink. His scarred hands moved carefully, as if simple actions required great effort. The Coalition had a weapon that had never failed in 300 years of galactic conflict. We called it the Mindbreaker. Your scientists might call it a fear amplification device. Jake looked up from his notes. What did it do? It reached into the deepest parts of a being's mind and brought every terror to the surface, every nightmare, every moment of doubt or fear. It made cowards of the bravest warriors and reduced entire armies to weeping children. Zexiah accepted his fresh drink and continued. The device had been tested on 43 different species. Humans would be the 44th. The Coalition scientists were certain it would break your resistance without the need for further military action. The alien commander's 4 eyes focused on something beyond the cantina walls, seeing events from 20 years past. We captured a human patrol near the Martian colonies. 5 soldiers led by Sergeant Kevin Blake. He was maybe 30 years old, with brown hair and calm eyes that reminded me of still water. Jake wrote quickly, trying to capture every detail. Blake and his men were brought to the Coalition flagship. The mindbreaker required controlled conditions for proper testing. They placed Blake in a white room with no windows or decorations, just walls, a chair, and the device. HFY took a small sip of his drink. I was present for the interrogation. My commander wanted veteran soldiers to observe the device's effectiveness. We expected to see Blake reduced to madness within minutes. The alien warrior paused, his expression growing darker. The device activated. Energy waves that could drive any known species insane flooded the room. Blake sat in his chair and looked directly at the observation window where we stood watching. What happened? He began to talk. HFY's voice grew quiet, not screaming or begging as every other species had done. He talked calmly as if he were having a conversation with old friends. Jake leaned forward, fascinated despite his growing unease. Blake told us about human history. He spoke of ancient battles where warriors fought against impossible odds. He described soldiers who charged into machine gun fire to save their comrades. He talked about pilots who flew damaged aircraft into enemy targets rather than abandon their missions. The alien veteran's scarred face showed something that might have been awe. He told us about a place called Thermopylae where 300 humans held off an army of thousands. About beaches in a place called Normandy where young men ran into gunfire knowing they would die. About towers in a city called New York where humans ran toward danger to save strangers. HFY paused to collect his thoughts. The mindbreaker was designed to show beings their worst fears. But Blake talked about humans who had faced every terrible thing we could imagine and found ways to overcome them. He made it sound as if fear was just another enemy to defeat. Jake stopped writing. The device didn't work on him? Worse than that, the alien replied. It strengthened him. Every wave of terror the machine sent into his mind, Blake countered with stories of humans who had faced similar horrors and emerged victorious. The cantina around them seemed to hold its breath as HFY continued. Blake spoke for 3 hours. He told us about wars we had never heard of. Battles that your species fought against itself with weapons that could destroy entire cities. He described humans who lived through these conflicts and still found reasons to help others. The alien warrior's 4 eyes met Jake's too. Near the end, Blake looked directly at me through the observation window. He said, "You think this machine shows me my fears? My fears are failing my mission and letting my men down. Your little box cannot make those fears worse than they already are." Jake felt his skin grow cold. Then Blake did something impossible. He stood up from the chair. The mindbreaker was still active, still flooding his mind with terror energy. That should have left him catatonic. He walked to the door and examined the lock mechanism. HFY's hands began to shake as he remembered. The door was secured with Coalition military-grade systems. No primitive species had ever breached such technology. Blake studied it for maybe 10 minutes while the device continued to attack his mind. And then, he opened it. We still do not understand how. Blake freed himself and immediately moved to help his captured soldiers. He killed 6 guards with his bare hands before we could stop him. The alien veteran took a larger drink, trying to steady his nerves. Even as he died from our weapons, Blake was still fighting. Not for himself, but to give his men a chance to escape. His last words were tactical instructions to help them find the detention area. Jake set down his pen. The weight of the story was becoming difficult to bear. That was when the Coalition leadership realized the truth, HFY said. Humans are not afraid of death, they are afraid of meaningless death. Give them a cause worth dying for, and your weapons become worthless. The alien warrior stared at his reflection in the amber liquid. The mindbreaker was decommissioned after the Blake incident. For the first time in galactic history, a species had not only resisted our most powerful psychological weapon, but turned it into a source of strength. HFY looked up at Jake with eyes that held too much knowledge. The Coalition Command made a decision that day. If humans could not be broken through fear, they would be broken through overwhelming force. The full fleet was ordered to Earth. The cantina had emptied except for a few patrons who sat close enough to hear every word. Commander HFY noticed them but did not seem to care. His story had reached the point where silence no longer mattered. Jake Morrison checked his recording device again. The battery indicator showed it was still working, still capturing the alien veteran's confession. Part of him wished it would fail so he would not have to hear what came next. The Coalition assembled the largest war fleet in galactic history, HFY began. 10,000 ships, battle cruisers that could crack planets, fighters that moved faster than light, weapons that could turn stars into supernovas. The alien warrior's 4 eyes stared past Jake, seeing ghosts from 20 years ago. Your species had maybe 300 vessels, old ships, slow ships. Some were not even military craft. Cargo haulers with guns welded to their hulls. Passenger liners converted into makeshift carriers. Jake wrote down the numbers, though they seemed impossible to believe. Admiral Carol Stone commanded your defense fleet from a ship called the U.S. Liberty, an ancient carrier that should have been scrapped decades earlier. Intelligence reports said she was 58 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. HFY paused to take a drink. The Coalition expected the battle to last maybe 6 hours. Our war computers calculated that human resistance would collapse after losing half their fleet. No species had ever continued fighting after such losses. The alien veteran's scarred face showed something that might have been respect. Admiral Stone broadcast a message to our fleet as we approached Earth. She said, "You have come a long way to die. We are ready to help you with that." Jake looked up from his notes. That was her surrender demand? That was her declaration of war. HFY corrected. Stone had no intention of negotiating. She deployed her ships in formations that made no tactical sense. Cargo vessels moved ahead of military craft. Civilian ships positioned themselves between our fleet and Earth. The alien commander described the opening moments of the battle. Coalition forces engaged what they thought were the primary human military targets, only to discover that many of the ships were filled with volunteers. A cargo hauler called the Denver Belle was crewed entirely by retired soldiers, men and women in their 60s and 70s who had come out of retirement to fight. They flew their ship directly into one of our battle cruisers at full speed. HFY's hands tightened around his glass. The explosion destroyed both vessels instantly. But before impact, the Belle transmitted tactical data about our ship's weak points to the rest of the human fleet. They died to give their military an advantage. Jake felt sick as he continued writing. This happened again and again. Human civilians volunteered for suicide missions without being ordered. A passenger liner called the New York carried 4,000 people directly into our formation. They used their ship as a shield while human fighters attacked from behind. The alien warrior's voice grew quieter. Captain Pete Sullivan was flying a damaged fighter with no weapons left. His engines were failing and his life support was critical. Instead of retreating, he guided his craft into the bridge of our flagship. HFY described the moment when the Coalition command structure began to break down. The death of their fleet admiral threw the alien forces into confusion just as the human resistance intensified. Your military ships fought like no vessels we had ever encountered. The UHS Nebraska had been hit by 3 plasma torpedoes. Its hull was breached. Its engines were dead. By all logic, the crew should have abandoned ship. The alien veteran took another drink before continuing. Instead, they used their remaining momentum to ram one of our dreadnoughts. The Nebraska's captain, Commander Bill Hayes, transmitted his ship's self-destruct codes to other human vessels, so they could use the same tactic. Jake stopped writing. Hayes? Was he related to Lieutenant Hayes from Luna Base? Her father, HFY confirmed. The human you killed his daughter. He made sure we knew this before his ship exploded. The weight of that revelation settled over the cantina like a heavy blanket. The battle continued for 8 hours. Far longer than our computers had predicted. Human ships kept fighting even when they had no weapons left. They used debris as projectiles. They rammed our vessels with their own hulls. They turned every piece of metal into a weapon. Zexiah's 4 eyes closed as he remembered. Admiral Stone's carrier was boarded during the final phase. Coalition Marines fought through the ship deck by deck. When they reached the bridge, they found Stone and her remaining crew preparing to activate the ship's reactor overload. The alien warrior opened his eyes and looked directly at Jake. Stone could have surrendered. Her ship was lost. Her fleet was destroyed. Earth's defenses had failed. But she looked at our Marines and said, "We will not kneel. We will not yield. And we will never, ever stop fighting." Jake's pen had stopped moving entirely. She activated the overload manually. The Liberty exploded with enough force to damage 6 coalition ships. Stone died at her post, still giving orders to help other human vessels escape. Zexai finished his drink and set the glass down with steady hands. We won the battle. Your fleet was destroyed. Your orbital defenses were gone. Earth lay defenseless before our remaining forces. The alien veteran paused for a long moment. But something had changed in our warriors. They had watched humans fight and die for 18 hours without ever showing fear or begging for mercy. They had seen an entire species choose death over surrender. Jake managed to find his voice. What changed? My soldiers were afraid, Zexai said simply. For the first time in Coalition history, our warriors were afraid of an enemy we had defeated. Because they realized that occupying Earth would mean fighting humans who viewed guerrilla warfare as a civic duty. The alien commander's scarred face showed exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. The Coalition won every battle against your species. But we lost the war the moment we realized that humans do not fight to win. They fight to make victory so costly that their enemies never want to fight them again. The cantina had grown completely quiet. Even the usual background noise of the space station seemed muted as Commander Zexai prepared to finish his story. Jake Morrison's hands had cramped from writing, but he could not stop taking notes. The war ended 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Zexai said. His voice carried the weight of 20 years of guilt and confusion. The Coalition controlled your world. Your military was destroyed. Your leaders were dead or captured. By every measure, we had achieved total victory. The alien veteran stared at his empty glass. But Coalition Command sent surrender terms instead of occupation forces. We sued for peace with a species we had completely defeated. Jake looked up from his notes. Why? Because the cost of holding Earth became clear within weeks of our victory. Human survivors did not accept defeat. They organized resistance groups. They attacked our supply lines. They turned every city into a battlefield. Zexai gestured for another drink, though his movements seemed tired. My unit was assigned to patrol duty in a place called Chicago. The city had been heavily damaged during the battle, but 2 million humans still lived there. We expected them to cooperate with Coalition authority. The alien warrior accepted his fresh glass but did not drink. Instead, they fought us every day. Not with weapons, though. They had those too. They fought with their refusal to help us govern them. Children would not speak to Coalition soldiers. Adults would not provide information. Old people would spit at our feet and walk away. Jake wrote frantically as Zexai continued. A human named Dr. Emma Clark ran an underground medical clinic. She treated wounded resistance fighters and Coalition soldiers with equal care. When we arrested her, she looked at us and said, "Healing people is not a crime. If you make it one, then you are the criminals." The alien veteran's 4 eyes showed confusion that had lasted 2 decades. Clark spent 6 months in detention. Every day, Coalition guards would ask her to cooperate. Every day she would refuse. Not angrily, not with hatred. She simply said no and returned to her cell. Zexai took a small sip of his drink. Other humans brought food to our detention centers. Not for their own people, but for coalition guards. They said that feeding hungry people was their duty, even if those people were their enemies. Jake stopped writing. They brought food for their captors? Every day. An old human female named Mrs. Betty Williams organized the effort. She had lost 3 sons in the war, but she insisted that coalition soldiers were far from home and needed care. The alien commander's scarred face showed something that might have been wonder. Williams told me that humans have a saying, "We feed our enemies because that is how we turn them into friends." She said hatred was a choice, and she chose differently. Zexai paused as memories played across his features. The resistance continued. For months, but it was not like other rebellions we had faced. Humans would attack our patrols, then help wounded coalition soldiers receive medical treatment. They would sabotage our equipment, then invite our guards to dinner. Jake tried to understand what he was hearing. They were fighting you and helping you at the same time? They were fighting our occupation while refusing to hate us as individuals, Zexai explained. Ambassador Frank Peters led the human delegation during peace negotiations. This was a man whose entire family had died in the Battle of Earth. The alien veteran described the peace talks that took place on a neutral station. Peters sat across from coalition leaders who had ordered the destruction of his world. He discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges as if we were old allies. No anger, no demands for revenge. Just practical conversations about building a future. Zexai's hands shook slightly as he continued. When Coalition Admiral Kretok asked why humans were willing to make peace with their conquerors, Peter said something that changed everything. Jake leaned forward. He said, "We do not make peace with you because we forgive what you did. We make peace because our children deserve better than a galaxy at war. You killed millions of us, but we will not kill millions of you. That is the difference between us." The alien warrior fell silent for several minutes. The peace treaty was signed 6 months after the Battle of Earth. Humans were granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Not as a conquered species, but as equals. Jake looked confused. "But you won the war. Why give them equal status?" Zexai's 4 eyes focused on the human reporter. "Because we realized that humanity's integration into galactic society was not a reward for their sacrifice. It was our insurance policy." The alien veteran explained the coalition's fear. Every species that fought humans was changed by the experience. My soldiers retired early and sought therapy for nightmares. Other units refused combat assignments. The psychological cost of fighting your species was destroying our military. Zexai took a larger drink. But worse than that, we learned something about humans that terrified every leader in the coalition. You do not stay defeated. Every human we killed in battle had children who remembered. Every destroyed city was rebuilt stronger. Every loss became a lesson for future generations. The alien commander's voice grew quiet. Ambassador Peters told us during negotiations that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They have lost battles, cities, entire civilizations. But they have never stopped believing that tomorrow can be better than today. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The coalition made humanity our allies because we could not afford to have them as enemies again. Better to work with a species that views forgiveness as strength than to face them across a battlefield a second time. Zexai finished his drink and stood slowly. "That is why I tell this story, young reporter. Not because humans won or lost the war, but because they fought it differently than anyone else in the galaxy. They fight for ideas that matter more to them than their own lives." The alien veteran placed money on the table and looked down at Jake. "Your species does not fight wars. You fight for futures you will never see, for people you will never meet, for ideas that cannot die even when you do. That is not warfare. That is something else entirely. Something we may never understand but can never defeat." Commander Zexai walked toward the cantina exit, leaving Jake Morrison alone with his notes and the weight of a story that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever.